Good evening, Razorback fans. We are back with another episode of Hawgs on the Hill, episode 10, your go-to podcast for an in-depth and into all things Arkansas Razorbacks. Join us as we dissect the victories, analyze the plays, and revel in the spirit of the Hawgs. As always, episode 10 is brought to you by Home Field. Step into the collegiate style of Home Field's premium vintage apparel. Embrace the spirit of your alma mater with your favorite team. With their meticulously crafted, comfortable, and stylish collections, you can elevate your game day attire. Celebrate the rich history of college sports. Home Field, where tradition meets modern comfort in every stitch. Use promo code Variety Sports in all caps to receive 15% off your order. Use that on your first order. Fantastic products out there. We're closing in on about 5 weeks to football season. It's getting here, as we keep doing these previews here of each of the position groups, kind of getting an idea of what we're going to see. It's getting me a little bit excited to see what we're going to do. We were just talking about it before the show started up here. They just announced that the Oklahoma State game week 2 is now sold out. So that's going to be a rowdy environment at 11 a.m. on week 2 of college football. It's going to be on ABC, so that's going to be an exciting Saturday and a big matchup for the Hogs. And something we kind of talked about, and I saw the question put out there was, before we dive into some more of our in-depth previews this week, does a big win week 2 on the road at a talented Oklahoma State team, now that it's sold out, it's going to be a big game, does that alleviate any pressure off of Sam Pittman early in the year getting a big win like that?
So my initial take is kind of twofold. I think it will help take some of the pressure off, especially on the mid-season firing type people, the doubters, if you will, whatever, however you want to, classify that. If he can get a win there, it does give you maybe a little bit more time later on in the schedule to have one or two more other losses that maybe he wouldn't make it past if he loses this Oklahoma State game as well. There's going to be a lot of speculation around that no matter how the season goes, unless we just come out and start the season 4-0 or something like that going into the A&M game. Then I think at that point, no matter what happens, you let him finish the year. But going into this game, getting a win would be huge for everybody's confidence because this is a really, really good Oklahoma State team. I think talent-wise, we stack up pretty well, but experience-wise, we were talking a little bit about it before the show. They have quite a bit more experience as a unit. They're basically their entire offense is returning from last year, except for maybe one or two linemen, something like that. It's pretty substantial how many guys they're returning, and their defense is returning several as well. So they've got a lot of experience playing together. That could be something that helps Oklahoma State since it's an early in the season game. Are they able to knock the rust off and kind of get back to the up-tempo offense that they were running there towards the end of last year, where they were scoring quite a few points a game? They had a decent year, had some losses that they shouldn't have had, in my opinion, but don't we all? Anyways, they've got a lot of experience coming in, and that could benefit them. But then on the flip side, with it being an early year game, who's the most rusty, who's the most prepared, who's the least prepared kind of situation. Each team will have a game to tune up, and then boom, test comes like week 2. So we could catch them off guard. They might not be as prepared as we are, depending. I don't know. And I'm honestly not 100% sure exactly how much chemistry we will have as an entire team, offense, defense, special teams, the whole shebang. How many mistakes can we minimize? That's going to be a big one in my mind with it being this early in the year, coming out there and play a good mental game as well as execute on the plays and things of that nature. But making the fewest amount of mistakes possible that early in the year is going to be a critical factor, I think. But back to the Sam Pittman stuff, though. If you win it, that's definitely going to take at least some pressure off, especially, I think, in that mid-year firing type scenario. But then if you lose it, I don't want to say it adds more pressure because I think a lot of people are realistic and know that this game is going to be a tough game to win. I think they probably are the better team unless
here's my thing here.
Crazy things
if
happen.
You lose it, I think you can't get blown out.
That's fair. I do agree with that. Even though it's on the road, you got to keep it within like 14. Preferably keep it in a single digits if you do lose. Less than 10 would be ideal. I know everybody hates losing one-score games, and those are the games where you say, well, if we'd have just scored one more time and won that game, you look back at last year, that season could have been 8-4 real easy if you flip-flop all the one-score loss games. But that's what football is all about, is minimizing the mistakes to where you do win the one-score games instead of lose the one-score games. LSU comes to mind, a couple others, So I I hate to say that losing it will magnify his chances of not making it out of the season exponentially or anything crazy, but I think it will definitely put some pressure on a couple more of the conference games that we need to win, like Auburn, Mississippi State, maybe Missouri. I don't really know. I think Missouri is going to take a step back from last year. They might be just as good. We'll see. I know Woods, Water, Mizzou, you guys are going to hate to hear that. But I don't know if what y'all did last year is going to be repeated or not. Y'all had a heck of a season. If it is repeated, that's kind of scary things for Arkansas fans. But anyways, there's a couple of SEC games in my mind. Tennessee, maybe they have potential to be pretty solid, but they have potential to have a step back as well. So there's a few games out there, SEC schedule-wise, that if you do lose this Oklahoma State game, the pressure builds. But then if you can win one or two or three of those, maybe you kind of lax the pressure back off. So the whole season on its own is going to be kind of a roller coaster, I think. But we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I think for me, I think this. I've said it before several times on the show. I think that this Oklahoma State game could be a key to the season, really, because if you look at it, that's a big game week 2, where if you win that game, you capitalize on momentum, and maybe you have a good run where you can, come back home, beat UAB, go on the road, beat Auburn, maybe beat A&M, and then the first half of your season is not looking bad, and then maybe you can figure out some games in that later half of the season that's a little bit tougher. But on the flip side of that, like if you can keep it close, like you said, 1 to 2 score game where, you don't get blown out, but you still lose it, but you feel confident that you're able to hang with a team like Oklahoma State. I think that gives you some positives as well. And I think the biggest question, just like, Woods, Water, Mizzou podcasts asking here, the big question is, how much is Coach Petrino getting out of Taylor Green? He brought him in, starting quarterback, very much his prototypical style quarterback. We kind of talked a little bit about that in our quarterback preview episode, but he's a guy that very mobile, can get himself out of trouble. How much has he developed his passing game from last season, where he finished like 56-ish% at Boise State in completion percentage? You look at it, he's playing against tough competition, but you also might have a little bit better receivers here at Arkansas. They've already talked about the continuity between these guys, that, he's going out there and throwing with his wide receivers in off time. A big key to this season is going to be the offensive line. That it seems like this year's offensive line is really much more connected than last season's were. But, I think depending on how well he picks up the offense, and, it seems like he spent a lot of time in the film room, I think Taylor could have a big year for Arkansas and kind of maybe help them get back on track, if you will.
I think the sky really is the limit for him in that regard. I think how well he plays and how well the offensive line play together is going to be make or break on, how exciting and surprising this season could be, or how disappointing this season could be. I think there's a lot riding there. Obviously, I think our wide receiver core is very deep. There's a lot of talent there. I'm not too worried about that. Not terribly worried about the defense. We'll hit some more on that later, but our defensive line kind of reloaded in my mind. Linebackers is a question, but we've got some good talent there. We kind of reviewed that last week. And then we brought back quite a bit of our talent on the back end. So I'm not as terrified about defense. I know we're going to give up points. It's the SEC. Everybody's got explosive offenses, and it's kind of the way college football is nowadays. You're going to give up some points, but can you minimize, where you can? So I really do think it is going to come down to how well the offensive line is able to protect, give Talon time to read defenses, extend plays with his legs, and have clean pockets when he needs to pass from the pocket or run the ball. Whether it's design QB draw type plays, things of that nature, we haven't seen a whole lot of that yet, but they don't run a lot of that in practice, obviously. So when it comes to game time, I mean, is that something that's more in our playbook than we're expecting? It could be, pull a little bit of KJ Jefferson back out of him or something like that. So we'll see. I think there is going to be a lot of potential, especially with kind of what the rumor mill spread. And I know Andrew Armstrong had an interview down there at media days and stuff talking about the offensive line and how he, being a guy that was on last year's team, he can see massive differences. That was verbatim what, one of his quotes was, it's like night and day difference on how this offensive line has gelled together, the way they basically do everything together. They rehab together, even though they're not injured, was one of his quotes, that they're constantly, making sure they're all staying as healthy as possible in the weight rooms together, hanging out outside of the football facilities together. There was some photos of a couple of the offensive linemen in Taylor Green going around at the rodeo event thing that was up there in Northwest Arkansas. So doing a lot of cool bonding outside of even football activities. So I don't know if you had as much of that in that offensive line last year, and I think it's showing. And even the players in the locker room see that of the offensive line as well. And that's one of the big things that's kind of a talking point right now. So it gives me hope. It gives me some confidence that there's already some good chemistry there and accountability there between each other. That they want to do well together. They want to hold each other up to high standards and be encouraging and not I don't really know the right words there, but anyhow, I think it's a step up from what we had last year, from top to bottom, honestly. But we'll see how far that gets us, though.
Yeah, I think it's going to be key. And, hopefully this is a good sign, that these guys are really bonding that way they can play as a whole unit. And you brought up media days. We went, we had our show early last week. I was out of town towards the end of the week, but, Pittman went on Thursday, and, that was the day that Arkansas kind of had a lot of their media interviews and such. And, Pittman, they were talking about how, ironically, he opened the press conference up. He got a question with about him being popular. And he's like, yeah, I'm popular, but not for a good reason, because he's on the hot seat. But coming out of media days, a lot of Arkansas media that got to be there, and even some national media, came out and said that they really feel like this was probably his best media days since he's been at Arkansas. So you've got to kind of maybe feel that is some hope that this program will turn around, that, he came out. Yeah, there's a lot of pressure on him, but he was still confident, said, we got back to it. One thing that I think is going to be keyed on, we talked about it before, but now that he's said it at media days, it's going to be even more put under a microscope, if you will. He said that he feels like the most improved unit on the team is the offensive line. I mean, we hope so.
No
I mean,
kidding.
that was the downfall last year, but I think with him coming out and saying that just after how poor offensive line play was last year, and the questions about that, and him being an offensive line coach, the retooling we did this year, like you said, we brought in a lot of new guys kind of up and down the board. And then with him being, you see in the clips in spring ball, with him being more hands-on with the offensive line, I mean, it's going to be very much focused on, especially early in the year, to see, yes, is this unit really that much improved? So I think that could be big, but I'm glad to see, I watched some of his press conference and everything. He seemed very confident up there on the podium, taking the questions, fielding questions, and kind of just, not shying away from those tough questions. And, you got to like to see that from a guy that's under a lot of pressure, honestly. I mean, a list came out yesterday of, I think it was like top 15 coaches most likely to be fired this year at some point or at the end of the year. And Pittman was number 2 on the board with 5-1 odds that it would be him. The only guy above him was Florida's Billy Napier at a 4-1 odds that he would get fired at least at some point this year or at the end. So, he's seeing all that, and hopefully, all this talk that's been had, and then these massive improvements that we're hearing about actually come to fruition, things line up like they need to.
Yeah, one quick note before we move on from media day stuff is, the one thing I will give Pittman over his entire tenure here is he doesn't really beat around the bush, and normally what he says is a fairly accurate assessment, at least from his perspective. He's not going to go up there and just give you a bunch of coach speech that you want to hear, make you think we're way better than we actually are. He said in plenty of times past, certain position groups need work. We're struggling here, A, B, and C. And so I think him saying that he's seen dramatic improvements is probably a true testament to what's actually going on. And like you said, I mean, that's exactly where you needed to see it. That was one of our biggest weaknesses, in my opinion, last year was our offensive line. And with that said, though, that gives you a big delta, if you will, to make up some ground. So, any big steps are going to feel like huge steps because we were kind of starting at rock bottom. I hate to dog on them, but that was a pretty rough crew last year. It was tough sledding, running the ball, throwing the ball, RPOs, and I mean anything. You couldn't even make RPO reads because you had two guys crashing in on whatever your reads were supposed to be. It just was bad. I don't know. We weren't doing well even on running backs picking up blocks either. So there's a lot of things that were left to be desired last year from a offensive line and blocking standpoint. So I think that's the area that needed the most improvement, and I think that's why Pittman focused on that area the most. And I think he was the guy that had the tools to really turn that unit around if it was going to get turned around. Him and Coach Mateos combining their efforts and really focusing there, going out and getting some better players, getting some good transfers in, utilizing NIL, I'm assuming, to go get some guys. I mean, Keyshawn Blackstock for sure, Addison Nichols, Fernando Carmona. I'm missing a handful too. But anyways, there's some fairly decent players that come in that I think are hungry players ready to grow and you've seen improvements just from, spring ball and stuff for these guys. So I'm excited to see what they're able to bring together, come together, play together well as an entire unit, kind of get the entire offense playing well around them. So like I said, the sky really is the limit. It really all keys on how well that offensive line can function and let the rest of the offense around it develop, whether it's run plays, screen plays, pocket pass, play action pass, bootlegs, whatever. It really does all come down to who can win in the trenches. And so we've got to have some better play there.
Yeah, that's very true. And we'll have that offensive line breakdown here in the coming weeks as we keep doing our position breakdowns. But, that's going to be big. I think that's what all eyes are going to be on those first few weeks to see, what does it look like? And, so, I mean, Pittman said it, we're improved. So hopefully that's the case. As we kind of move on here, Arkansas picked up another commitment for the 2025 class in cornerback Nigel Pringle, a 3-star guy that's top 90 in the country. Another big commitment for Arkansas, kind of bringing in some young pieces for that defense that, as you're trying to develop talent. Another great pickup for, as they continue their recruiting after, picking up that big 4-star and Tavion Wallace at linebacker. And then you follow that up with a guy that's top 90 in the country at his position.
Yeah, it's not bad at all. I'll take it. Travis Williams is kicking it out there, man.
I was about to say defense has been much improved over the past few seasons, and I hope we continue to see that improvement this year. And I think with how
you can see the cogs turning of like if we can kind of keep a little bit of traction and momentum, you're picking up a couple 4-star guys every offseason. I mean, that's how you keep a defense in tip-top shape.
Yeah. As we keep on the recruiting, we're flipping over to basketball where going in tomorrow, Arkansas is official on ACUF watch. He will commit tomorrow, Friday, the 26th. It's going to be big for Arkansas. He's got some couple crystal balls for Arkansas. He's the number 1 point guard in next year's class. I mean, there's nothing but to say, but I mean, Calipari is swinging for the fences and his name's helping. I mean, you got a guy that wasn't even really looking at Arkansas, and then you bring in Cal, and we might just be getting the number 1 point guard in the country for next year's recruiting class.
I think he's overall like the number 8 player out of everybody, which is it's incredible. Definitely program changing caliber type player, that type of potential.
He's almost like a Moses Moody, Anthony Black, Nick Smith type guys, or even these guys that we got coming in, these top talents like your Boogie Flange, your Billy Richmonds, guys that historically in the past Arkansas wouldn't have gotten those type of guys. Yeah,
You might get one.
You might get one. Like we got Moses Moody. He was an in-state kid, and I think we had that playing to our favor that he wanted to, if he can get to where he wanted to go, the NBA through his home state school, why not? And then you had him go. You had Arkansas go out and get Anthony Black, Nick Smith, Jordan Walsh, 3 guys that are all in the NBA right now. I think that shows what national stage Arkansas has gotten back to, and I think bringing in Calipari is just going to hopefully raise that to the next level. And looking at that with him potentially committing tomorrow, and then Arkansas is now in the Final 5 for 5-star guard Jasper Johnson, another top 5-star guy that why not play for Coach Cal and get you the NBA when that's all he did at Kentucky, and now he's just same coach, same philosophy, just at a different spot.
Yeah, 100%. You start landing 2, 3, 4, 5 stars every offseason of freshmen, and then have a couple big time transfers, and then have a couple of players that maybe weren't a 5-star coming in as a freshman, but can kind of stay and stick with the program for 2, 3 years and give you a little bit of that experience and leadership in your program and build some culture with those guys. That's the recipe for success lately in college basketball, and it's wild to think that we're in that type of caliber of program to where we're able to go out and get multiple 5-star top talents year in and year out. It's nuts.
Yeah, that's I mean, that is crazy. I mean, you just think it was almost like Coach Musman leaves, oh no, the sky is falling, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere,
beautiful rainbow.
Right. I was about to say the Coach Cal rumors start, and then you're like, wait a minute, could this really happen? And now, you look at he's here and look what he's doing already. And then we haven't even played a single minute of basketball. And the Palace is about to be hyped next season. And it's going to be a very, very hyped and a season that, similar to last year, there's going to be a lot of expectations, and hopefully this year ends up differently than last year did. Arkansas did add another non-conference game with UNC or NC State or something. Yeah, that they'll add to the as they're building this non-conference schedule. So, I mean, we'll continue to see this development as we move on. We'll talk about this again as it starts tomorrow night, opening ceremonies for the Paris Olympics. And don't forget, you have future Razorback Jocelyn Robinson that traveled, and she will be an alternate for the gymnastics team. So great things for her to be over there representing Arkansas. She'll enroll in college this fall and be a Razorback. Other transfer portal news, baseball kind of lost a guy in Carson Hansen, outfielder that committed from Wisconsin-Milwaukee. It was a sophomore. He decommitted and actually flipped to Kentucky. And, I'm not necessarily hurt about this, but I think it was honestly one of those things where you just had a lot of guys that had transferred in and committed that playing time was probably going to be hard to come by, especially after the news of Kendall Diggs coming back. That's an automatic outfield spot right there if he starts in right field again. So then you only have 2 open spots in the outfield instead of 3.
Yeah, I think that 100% played into this. Plus, there's, like you said, we've had several outfielder pickups. Some of them that have serious potential to do some damage at the plate and some damage on the base paths. So like you said, the competition is going to be fierce. And then we even had a couple of guys coming back that didn't even play this past year that will have some potential vie for playing time in the outfield as well. So I hate to lose a commitment. It just kind of feels icky. But I don't think it's anything that's necessarily a testament to the coaching staff misplaying this person, if you will. So I think truly it probably is somebody that realizes, okay, I probably have a better opportunity to actually play in the SEC if I can go over and fill a hole at Kentucky. They're also a good baseball team, especially this past year. They've come a long way So it's not a bad thing to go over there and play for another highly touted, very good coached baseball team that made it quite far, this past season. So I don't blame them at all. Not at all.
Yeah, 100%. Back to the Olympics, another thing that we didn't get to talk about is look at the number of guys that are from the university representing. So Arkansas will have 25 Razorbacks representing 9 different countries in 4 different sports at the Olympics: track and field, golf, swimming, gymnastics. So that means Arkansas track and field, it's alone has an NCAA leading 20 athletes representing 7 different countries at the Olympics this year.
Is anybody surprised? No.
Not at all. I was about to say, it's insane. I think that just kind of continues to show Arkansas is track capital of NCAA right now. I mean, if you want to run track and, have the opportunity just like this to compete in the Olympics, there you go. And not taking away talent from these guys, but I mean, just how successful Arkansas track and field's been over the past 20 plus years. You come here, get that national media attention, but then also get to go out and qualify and participate in the Olympics is just
pretty
insane.
Special.
Yeah, so get out there over the weekend and the next few weeks as the Olympics are going on, and get out there and watch watch these Arkansas kids that are representing different countries. They may not be competing for the U.S., but they're still a Razorback at the end of the day. So it's going to be fun to watch all of these athletes in both, men's and women's sports. And, I don't want anybody to get hurt, but it'd be pretty cool to see Jocelyn get a chance to perform gymnastics there too. And, it's just going to be cool to watch. The Olympics are always fun to watch, and, all the different sports and things of that nature. And so with that, we'll jump to tonight's main topic, as we are going to be talking about Arkansas wide receivers and tight ends tonight. This is one of the, I think, more talked about groups other than the linebackers, not because of unknown, but because of just how much talent there are in these two rooms combined. I mean, if you look at it, you're returning all in your entire receiving tight end core from last season. You didn't lose a single person, which that's hard to do in today's day and age with transfer portal, NIL, people going to the draft and whatnot. And so, we'll circle back around and talk about these guys, but we'll just run through the roster right now for all the wide receivers Arkansas has on this roster. You've got Jaden Wilson, 6'3", 186. He's a redshirt junior. You've got Andrew Armstrong, 6'4", 199, redshirt senior. Isaac Tesla, 6'4", 216, a senior. You've got Tyrone Broden, 6'7", 198. He's a redshirt senior. Isaiah Satania, 5'11", 183. He's a redshirt sophomore. Jordan Anthony, transfer from Texas A&M. He's 5'10", 162, a redshirt sophomore. Riker Acebo, 6'4", 203, redshirt freshman. He is a guy that moved over from quarterback during the spring. Bryce Stevens, 6', 188, redshirt junior. CJ Brown, 6'1", 194. He's a freshman, 3-star prospect that came in from Bentonville. Wide receiver Cross Johnson, 5'10", 170. He's a freshman. Zach Taylor, 6'4", 170. He's a freshman. Monte Harrison, one of the most intriguing guys that Arkansas picked up in the offseason, 6'3", 225. He is a freshman, but he was a second-round major league pick in 2014 and played 10 seasons in the majors and minors combined, and he was a 4-star football recruit in high school back in 2014. You've got Dasmond James, 6'2", 196. He's a redshirt freshman. Jace Petty, 5'8", 171, redshirt sophomore. Walker Katsavis, 6'4", 176, redshirt sophomore, transferred in from Arkansas State. Cameron Bibby, 6'2", 180, redshirt sophomore. Davian Dozier, 6'4", 203, redshirt freshman. And Caffrey Brown, 6', 195, redshirt senior, transferred in from USF. As we circle back to the top here, these really first 5 to 6 names are who we're going to be really focused on this season that you're probably going to see at the top of the depth chart for the Razorbacks. And, we'll start out here with Andrew Armstrong. He's a guy that he was our leading wide receiver last year, finished the season played in all 12 games, 56 catches, 764 yards, and 5 touchdowns. He led the team in catches, yards per games, and touchdowns last season. I mean, he's coming back. We just talked about it, bonded and had that kind of working on that chemistry with Taylor Green in the offseason. I think he's easily primed to be your wide receiver 1 this year. And I'm interested to see what he can do this year with hopefully a better offensive line and a Petrino offense. I think that's going to be the thing. These two position groups here, if we have an improved offensive line and that Petrino offense gets rolling like we know it can, man, these two position groups could be in for a big year.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I'm not going to be expecting tremendous leaps on it, but at least some improvement is going to be the big playability. That's something that I felt like we've lacked a little bit, especially last year. You think back to some of Kendall Brow's years, there were some big plays off and on. But you think back to Petrino days, and it was like every other play was a big play. You had some freakazoids out there between Ryan Mallett, Tyler Wilson, and then the plethora of receivers that were around and tight ends back then. So, I mean, it was you had 12 seconds left before halftime, and then you score a touchdown on 2 back-to-back 50-yard bombs. I mean, just stuff like that just hasn't happened at Arkansas in some time. So I'm excited to see if we get some glimmers of that type of special big playability, if you will. I think we've definitely got the wide receiver room for that, tight ends as well. And then, we already kind of hit on it a little bit earlier in the show, but can the offensive line provide enough time and protection for Taylor to actually throw accurate, deep passes? If you're on the run, scrambling for your life, trying to launch something, you're going to lose accuracy. It's just all there is to it. So to be able to hit on those big plays and not underthrow, overthrow, just completely miss accuracy-wise, you need to be able to really plant yourself and throw an accurate ball. So that's going to be like really critical number one thing, in my opinion, to see how successful a lot of these wide receivers are going to be. I think there's going to be, some more design plays for those big explosive plays, whether they are, set up screens, things like that. You can have big plays off of tunnel screens and stuff, or if it's more of your traditional kind of deep route type pitch and catch. So obviously Andrew Armstrong is, I think, the number one wide receiver option. I think Isaac TeSlaa is definitely a very close number 2. And then you could probably throw Broden up there as a really close number 2 or number 3 as well, just due to his size. He's enormous. So you get down in the red zone area. I mean, he's 6'7", 190. That's a big body with tremendous wingspan. I mean, you get him in position.
There, let him high point it.
Yeah, literally. I mean, if he's got position and a good matchup, you don't even have to be that accurate with the throw. So there's a couple of guys we just named right there that I think are kind of probably your 1, 2, 3s, but then you've got a couple others here that are just going to be really vying for a lot of balls coming their way too. So, big thing though, I think, is Andrew Armstrong is going to draw a lot of attention. People saw what he did last year, and they understand that what he did last year was even with kind of a handicapped offense, in my opinion. So I think he's primed to have a step up even from last year's numbers, even though there's a lot of mouths to feed on this offense.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, when you look at it too, another guy, you just mentioned TeSlaa in 12 games last season, 34 catches, 351 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Hopefully he can be utilized more this year. He is from practice last year, he is an insane athlete. So, hopefully, it's tough to talk about this because a lot of this is really predicated on, do we have an improved offensive line? Because if 100%. Taylor has time and can distribute, these are some really talented wide receivers. Another guy you mentioned, Broden, he in 12 games last year, 15 catches, 109 yards, 3 touchdowns, but a big-bodied guy. But then you've got Jaden Wilson that played in some games last year. He's a redshirt junior, 12 games, 15 catches, 199 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And then Satania.
Yeah, then Satania too.
Yeah, and Satania, one of the things about him that in the offseason they talk about, he was running track at Arkansas, but kind of, put that to the side so he could focus on football, kind of maybe bulk up a little bit. He's 5'11", 183 coming into this season. And in 12 games last year, he had 15 catches, 129 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Hopefully this year, like you said, that speed we know how Petrino can use speedy wide receivers with what he had back when, you had
Greg
round one
Childs.
here, Greg
Yeah.
Childs, Joe Adams, the plethora of wide receivers that you have some fast guys. Petrino can dial up some plays and get guys into space where he can make things happen. Another guy that I'm intrigued about is Jordan Anthony, a guy that came over from A&M. We know Petrino coached at A&M last year, so he's familiar with him. And, yes, he only played in 4 games, only had 3 catches, 14 yards, but he
He's a
probably
track
came
star.
over for a reason.
Yeah,
I was about to say, track star, has that speed. I can see him on some of those go deep routes, just with that speed, maybe beating off some of those DBs. And, there'll probably be some plays dialed up for him this season through that Petrino offense. But, I mean, when you look at it, this is not only is it a very talented wide receiver room, but you've got a lot of experience too. I mean, all these guys were here last year, but they're not, just like, oh, they were here last year and they're sophomores this year or they're juniors. You've got redshirt juniors, redshirt seniors that are redshirt seniors plus a COVID year. So they're more than just redshirt seniors. So what do they bring with that experience? And then I really want to see Monte Harrison get some, playing time, even though he's a freshman. Man is 28 years old. And
he's not going to get rattled in any scenario.
No.
He's been there, done that plenty of times in MLB, so.
I was about to say, plus you got to think about how much development he has and how physically developed he can be with having years in the pros and really knowing how to take care of his body. I mean, man can probably be able to go up against most any of these SEC defensive backs and have success. So we'll be interested to see, how much he plays this year. Does he stay with the team multiple years, or is this kind of a one-year thing? Let me live out playing college ball dream. I don't know.
Doing some side quests.
Right, yeah. And so that'll be interesting to see what happens there with these guys. And then, part of you can call them wide receivers, but the tight ends, I'd be willing to go out on a limb and say if Arkansas has one of the best tight end rooms in the country this year with just pure talent standpoint. You've got the big name that everybody's hyping up this year coming back is Luke Haas. He was primed and he was starting to break out last year, had a big game against LSU, and unfortunately got hurt against A&M. But through 4 games last year, 16 catches, 253 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And he got hurt in that 5th game versus A&M. And he comes back 6'3", 230, ready for a big year. And, we know Petrino can utilize those tight ends like nobody else. And, you got another good one here that I think he's back healthy, picked up this offense. We could see him, as we talked about before the show, and just like in NCAA or college football 25, he could be a cheat code for this Arkansas team and be very much a good safety blanket and a big piece to Taylon Green this year.
Yeah, no, that's 100%. There's already been plenty of people. That's a talking point, is that him and Taylon already have fairly good chemistry. I think that's something that Luke Haas is ahead of the game. I think he's well mature for his age as far as understanding how to get open, how to read quarterbacks' eyes and their mind in a way, kind of be that security piece, show them your numbers whenever they're scrambling, understand their tendencies, where they like to throw the ball. I think he's very, very ahead of the curve on understanding zone coverage, where to hunker down in any type of zone, find that open hole out there. And then in man situations, when he's matched up against, usually a linebacker, he's more athletic than a lot of linebackers out there. Let's be real. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's some SEC linebackers out there that are every bit as athletic as Luke Haas. But the kid is phenomenal. I think he was really primed to have an outstanding freshman season for us as a true freshman. I think if he'd have stayed healthy all year, he probably would have been the guy that led the team in receptions and reception yards and things of that nature. It just kind of looked like that's where the trajectory was going with him and KJ Jefferson. And dude, legitimately, if he stays healthy, maybe there's a couple of games that we don't lose. He's that good of a player that can have that type of impact on games that when he's out of the game, you can lose because of it. Like he's that caliber of a player. If you don't think that, just watch him. Seriously, like he's that good. So having him in that tight end room mixed in with a couple of these other big body wide receivers, that's got to be. I know the SEC's tough and everybody's got big guys, but like that's got to be pretty intimidating for an opposing defense, especially considering most corners aren't as big, most linebackers aren't 6'7". Like, I mean, that's intimidating. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Alabama. Like that's some big boys coming at you every single play from every single angle, from every single position on the field, skill position wise. There's big guys on this lineup at the wide receiver position, at the tight end position, at the running back position, at the quarterback position. Taylor's 6'6". I mean, like these guys are big. Everybody in the SEC is big as well, but I feel like we match up just as well as all the big boys out there. So I think that's something that bodes well for us. And having big targets to throw to that still have some speed, that's going to do good things for Taylor Green. I think it'll help build his confidence early, especially on, the dink and dunk type plays, taking what the defense gives you to kind of get you in rhythm early in games. You've got a lot of different guys that you can throw to depending on defensive matchups. It's not like you have to go to one guy the first couple of plays to get any kind of rhythm. You can go to a lot of different ones to get some rhythm. So that's going to be helpful for sure. And there's a couple other names we're about to go through here that have potential to be that big time number 2 tight end that nobody covers because Luke Haas is getting double covered and they're open every play. So I don't know. It gets me more excited than I probably should be, but we got some talent.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, Petrino's no stranger to 2 tight end formations either. And the other guy that you got to look at last year that filled in for Lucas last year until he got hurt as well was Ty Washington, 6'4", 240 coming into this season. He's another really talented guy. Through 9 games last year where he started 3 of them after Haas got hurt, had 11 catches, 170 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Just like you said, has the chance to be a number 2 tight end that gets a lot of looks because people are trying to double coverage Haas and things like that. And then another guy that redshirted last year that there's been a lot of hype around coming into his recruitment, Shamar Easter. He is a home state kid, was the number 1 player in the state a couple of years ago during recruitment. He comes in at 6'5", 227 as a redshirt freshman due to him redshirting last year. There's a lot of potential with this guy, and I'm interested to see what Petrino and Pittman can get out of him because, the talent's there. There was some talk last year that maybe he wasn't picking up the offense as quick as they would hope or things like that. Maybe it was some injury issues. I don't know. But the talent's definitely there. Can't forget about Varkey's Gums, a guy that transferred in from North Texas last year, 6'3", 244. He's a redshirt junior. Played in 11 games last year. Only had 3 catches, 26 yards. But, I mean, that's if you think about how last year's offense was, that's not surprising. You've got Spencer Hensley, a redshirt freshman, 6'5", 236. No stats for last year. Maddox Laster, 6'3", 228, a redshirt freshman. Same thing. Luke Johnston, 6'5", 239. And then a guy that transferred in from Eastern Michigan, Andreas Paskey, 6'6", 262. And in 7 games for Eastern Michigan last year, had 4 catches, 39 yards. If we're being honest, this guy came in to be a bulldozer and a bruiser and a blocking tight end for, these running backs like Jaquindon Jackson and Rashad Dominion that we'll talk about in the coming weeks. But, I mean, you got a tight end at that size, stick him in front of your running back and lead the way.
Yeah, I think the comparison is like Nathan Bax, I believe was his name. Just a big dude that can get out there and truck some guys. Had a couple catches from time to time. You could sneak him in there, especially on some of those like goal line jump pass type things that KJ started to kind of perfect. He had a couple of those. So like we spoke to already, there's quite a bit of talent in this tight end room as well as the wide receiver room both. A lot of mouths to feed for sure. And so I'm not sure who are going to be your guys that really step up and get the bulk of the targets and things of that nature. I think it truly does depend on two things: chemistry with Taylor Green and, their jive and understanding of routes together at the same time. And then, kind of the second thing is understanding the playbook to where they're not making mental mistakes. That's been one of the big coaching talking points around Bobby Petrino on who gets playing time and who doesn't, is who understands the scheming and the playbook and positioning, all those types of things, understanding how to read like zone coverage on some of those like option type routes where you can run a curl, run a go, depending on what the coverage is. And it's understood that there is going to be some decision making go on in your route itself. So it's going to be those types of things, I think, that really trigger who all is going to be out there outside of Luke Haas and Ty Washington. I think those are going to be your two guys, but you got guys like Gums and Paskey and Easter that I really think are going to vie for some snaps, and a lot of it's going to come down to those things like that. In the same way, in the wide receiver room, we kind of skimmed over it a little bit, but Broden, Satenya, Tesla, Andrew Armstrong, Jaden Wilson, that's probably your main five with some Jordan Anthony sprinkled in, especially considering Jordan Anthony is a little bit more familiar with some of Petrino's plays and things of that nature, being able to play under him already for a year. So that's probably your 5 or 6 guys. But then you got a guy like Bryce Stevens, who showed sparks a couple years ago. Didn't have a whole lot of playing time last year. Not necessarily sure exactly what was going on there. You've had a couple other guys come in, C.J. Brown, obviously Monte Harrison. There's a handful of dudes there.
You can't forget David Dozier too. I mean, he was a guy that has a lot of potential that, 6'4", 203, a great sized receiver.
They said he's made tremendous strides since last year too. He was one of the guys that was getting a lot of the accolades in spring ball for how well he was playing and how much development he had. So like I said, there is plenty of competition to go around there. And I think a lot of the playing time and targets and those types of things is going to come down to mental mistakes, chemistry with your quarterback, not necessarily who's the fastest, who runs the crispest routes. I mean, those things come into play. Don't get me wrong. They really do. But there's a lot of intangibles there that everybody knows Bobby Petrino harps on that are going to be what makes or breaks if you play or not. So that's the stuff that I'm the most excited to really see out of this like wide receiver room that I know has a ton of talent. Who, what cream rises to the crop or rises to the top out of these groups and really earns that playing time, because I think that's going to be kind of a little bit of the difference in this year and last year is the playing time, the snaps, the targets, everything is going to be earned more, I feel like, this year compared to given. I don't want to say everybody was given their spot. There was a lot of spots that were earned last year, but I mean, let's be real, man. There was a couple of spots that were given just because of what their name was. Rocket Sanders come to mind, a couple guys like that. I'm not going to throw just a ton of names out there, but like some of those guys come to mind that it just almost seemed like the effort wasn't necessarily there like midway through the year. And there was a lot of mental mistakes happening, a lot of critical errors happening on different types of plays, somebody missing blocks, things like that. Just bad football from a fundamental standpoint. And so that's got to change. And I think that's going to be critical on who you see out there play in and play out.
Yeah, I mean, and you just think about that. You're talking about that mental aspect. To call back to some previous episodes when we talked to, friend of the show and, a good buddy of ours that we talked to, Javante Herndon, that played under Petrino for Arkansas several years ago. He talked about how he was able to capitalize and get playing time early on and I don't know if he necessarily would do this anymore, but he had like game week quizzes that he would quiz these guys on and see where they were at as far as the playbook and the game plan for that week. Stuff like that shows how much detail oriented Petrino is. And like you said, that puts some responsibility on those receivers to come out there and make those decisions and those reads. Do I run route A or route B? What's my man? What's this DB? What's the coverage look like? And things like that. So there's going to be a lot of responsibility on these guys. And this is where, like you said, based on all those factors you named, what guys kind of separate themselves and seize the opportunity to step up. I mean,
Yep.
you could have, you could have somebody out of this list that kind of comes out and surprises everybody and finds his way into some decent playing time. Maybe one of these freshmen. You don't know.
Khafre Brown, the transfer. You never know, man. I mean, there's a ton of names out there and a ton of question marks. I mean, Monte Harrison, however you pronounce his name, that's going to be a great one to follow, whether he gets playing time or not, just because of who he is. So there's some cool things that are going to be fun to follow and keep track of, no matter if we're winning or losing and things of that nature. We're hoping we're winning and playing really competitive and playing well. And you see a lot of these guys stacking up some great numbers and have some highlight plays. That's the fun part of football. But even outside of that, even in losses and things of that nature, are we able to see these guys develop, improve week in, week out? There's going to be some tough games this year. There's no doubt about it. There's going to be some learning curve for a lot of these guys that are coming in and haven't played under a Petrino offense, haven't played in the SEC before, a lot of things like that. Tons of question marks this year at a lot of different positions. I think there's less question marks as far as who the guys are going to be and how much talent we have, but it's how well do they adapt to this new offensive style? How well do they adapt to this new quarterback? How well do they adapt to, maybe playing a different spot and less wide receiver, more slot receiver, or whatever the case may be. So I've got high hopes, but definitely a lot of questions that need answered, and it's going to be a fun ride kind of watching those play out as the season goes along.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of those things where everybody knows what kind of Petrino offense we can have based on years past. And can we get back to that? If so, this team has the potential to score a lot of points and be in a lot of games that maybe preseason we were counted out just because you don't know. Like you said, with those unknowns, like what is this team really going to be? If we come out and have an improved offensive line and everybody's really picked up this Petrino offense and, really has it, and Taylor's able to made those improvements as a passer, like you said, the sky's the limit. This could be, a very surprising year for the Hogs. But I think those first few games, once you see, of course, game one, UAPB, things are probably going to be kept quote unquote vanilla. You're not going to probably do a lot, dive really deep into your playbook. Save that for week two. Like we said, big game week two, Oklahoma State. I think that's going to be, I don't want to call it the most important game of the season, but it could be a pivotal key, and that's as early as week two.
Yep.
We can't say it enough. If you go in and get a win there,
that can set the trajectory. Yeah, for sure.
What's stopping you from making it through the Texas A&M game 4-1, 5-0?
Yep. Because if you think about it, like on paper, Oklahoma State is as good or better than pretty much anybody through week 6, 7. If you go into their house and pull off a pretty substantial upset, that's what it's going to be. If we go in and beat them, that'll be an upset. There's no doubt about it. Even though we are an SEC team, they're a Big 12. That's going to be an upset. That could set the tone, and being able to beat a team of that caliber, I think it does. It would instill the confidence in you that, okay, honestly, any team that's on our schedule after that is probably not much better than that Oklahoma State team from top to bottom. We can compete with anybody. That would give you that level of confidence. Even if you lose, like we said, if you keep it, 7 points or under, even if you lose and are very competitive, have a lot of good plays, have a lot of good execution, and you're not getting just crushed from mental mistakes and things like that, that still, I think, is a good testament that you're going to be able to compete for the rest of the year. So there is going to be a lot of eyes on that game. And I think a lot of things learned in that game that are going to show what the trajectory of the rest of the season can be. You can make tremendous developments and turn things around late in the season. You've seen teams in the past do that. Haven't necessarily seen Arkansas do that much in the past, but, we'll see. But I think a lot of eyes really are going to be on week 2 and then week 5 against A&M.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure. Like I said, they're going to be favored by how much is the real question. Week 2, it is in their house. They've got a returning starter. I wouldn't be surprised to see a pretty heavy spread on that game.
Like 15 points heavy.
Yeah. And so, it's one of those things. There's a lot of optimism, a lot of unknowns. We talked about it. There's talent on the linebackers as far as that being the most questioned position group in my mind. There's a lot of talent. Can we capitalize on it? On the flip side of that, you've got a lot of talent and a lot of experience in this wide receiver tight end room. Do you capitalize on that? We'll keep breaking down these groups in these next coming weeks. We'll maybe flip to back to the defensive side of the ball for next week as we keep kind of going back and forth and get through these before kickoff in about 5 weeks. We're just right about a month away from kickoff for this 2024 football season. I think you can get from us that, there's a lot of excitement, but also a lot of question marks that we want to see answered early on. And so I think that's going to be big. I mean, keep coming back as we do in these position breakdowns. And we'll keep you updated on transfer portal and recruiting news for Arkansas across the sports, whether it be football, basketball, baseball, softball, you name it. We're going to try to get it covered as if there's news going on. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And thank you for listening to today's episode of Hogs on the Hill. And we'll be back here next week with another one of our position group breakdowns.